Welcome in to SEC football and beyond. It's Dan Matthews. It's Chris Landry with you here for the first edition of the week after a great weekend that it was in the SEC. Chris, we are going to get to all of the games that went down, some great, some not so great for some in the conference, but we will cover them all from beginning till end, and also to if we have time at the end. Always love whenever you jump in and give us your comments in the mailbag portion of it. You can hit us up right here on the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. You can also hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Dan Matthews ATL. Chris is at Landry Football is the way that you can find us too. If you ever have a question, don't forget, when you catch this show or any show on the Landry Football Podcast channel, as well as the Punt and Pass Podcast, and along with everything in the Landry Football Podcast channel, we've got the Texas A&M Football Scouting Report that comes your way on Wednesday mornings. We've got the Alabama Football Scouting Report that comes your way on Wednesday afternoons. And Chris, for both of those, a lot to talk about for Alabama in the past, but also too for A&M, their first big test of the season.
Yeah, I think A&M Arkansas, you could make the case, is along with Notre Dame, Wisconsin, maybe the game of the week. It's certainly the featured game of the week in the conference. It's the 2:30 game. So we talked about it. We talked about it last week, coming off the Arkansas victory over Texas, that this is going to tell us a lot. You know, we had Alabama, Florida that we put to bed this week, and this is going to tell us a lot with Arkansas A&M and A&M. We'll get into it. A&M's offensive line didn't block particularly well this past weekend. Calzada played well, though. How much further advanced they're going to be? Their defense is really good. This is a really good Arkansas team. Going to frustrate the young quarterback. Is he going to have success? How is this going to play out? It's going to be a lot of fun. So the feature game, no doubt, this week is going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and as I was saying with all of the podcasts, you can find them all wherever you get your podcast needs, Apple, Spotify, or also the easiest way that you can do it and get all of these shows, plus the Chuck Oliver Show, which of course comes your way every weekday from 11 Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. So you can get that. And if you miss the show, don't worry about it. Get both hours up on the podcast daily, and also to a live stream of the show is always there when you download the Southern Sports Today app. So a one-stop shop for everything great, college football and beyond. We have it all for you right there as part of the Landry Football Podcast channel. Chris, so let's get into some SEC news and notes. A couple of games affected this weekend. We are going to talk about it, but really just kind of an overarching, I guess, discussion here in the news and notes about officiating in the SEC, because Chris, it seems like, and Chuck talked about this during Monday's show on his daily show, is that why does it seem like the SEC is the only conference that has these happen? You don't ever really hear about these happening in the Big Ten. You don't hear about them as much in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or anywhere else. It seems like it's always the SEC that has these situations.
Well, you remember now it's been a couple of years. Remember they had the major meltdown in the Pac-12 where somebody in the Pac-12 office called into a game, had a call switch. That was a real major brouhaha there. It's happened. I think the magnitude of the game matters. I mean, I see some egregious errors when I look at tape. But let's just call it like it is. When it's a game that, between Kansas and, Texas Tech, I don't think they really care a whole lot about it. But when it's on a bigger stage, I think it comes noticed. Or when it's something weird that happens. Look, there's no doubt it's a mistake. I just talked about it last hour, and I won't go into the whole diatribe again, but I'm a big believer that there should be no such thing as SEC officials or Big Ten officials. They should be college football officials. I think they should be trained unilaterally. I'm a big believer, and I mentioned this on all the committees I've been in the NFL. And everybody's so darn cheap, but for the good of the game, we need the NFL. should really help in the aid of putting together better training and development, because a lot of those guys, the good ones, end up going to the NFL anyway. They come from college. So I think there ought to be an emphasis on training better, doing better. But the biggest thing that we're going to have to embrace, Dan, is technology. The game is going to have to eventually, and right now they're not wanting to do it. They don't want to take the game away from on the field, the officials on the field, and they want to just utilize the eye in the sky to help. What's going to happen at some point. Now, I don't know when they're going to do it. The game is going to have to move to the booth. Meaning, instead of all the stoppages and you go and look under a hood, you're going to have a crew, in addition on the field. You're going to have the crew in a box with the big monitors and the ability to, as the game, a special tape where you can rewind it live. So as the game concurrently goes, you can have an oversight right there where you simply just say, Dan, it's not grounding. It's 1st and 10 from the 45 going in. Let's go. Boom. And it's the official on the field in the white hat, as you have got the white hat there. And then you move it. So you don't have I'm going to go do it. That's where it's lost, because we lost in the world. We had somebody join us in the chat room. I saw and says it's been that way for a while. It has been. But I grew up in a time, Dan, before where you didn't have replay. And the bad calls were made, but you didn't see it as much. The minute we had replay and it became a more and more part of technology, we saw the mistakes, but there was nothing you could do about it. Now the replays are there to get it right. So let's embrace technology, use the technology so that we can get the calls correct and get it done in real time faster. It's the only way. Now, things like giving a team an extra down, because you lose a down when you have intentional grounding, but you don't take away another one. I mean, you lose the down, and let's, on top of that, we'll take it. That's inexcusable.
100%.
But you cannot, and I say this, then people criticize these guys for missing a play on the field. If you've ever been down on the field, there is no way to see that in real time. I described it as like when a deer crosses you in front of a highway. You don't know what it's like. You just react. You don't know what the bleep happened. It's there. You can't see it. I watch tape for a living, and every time I see something, I see it one way, and then after watching it 3 different versions, I see it differently. There's no way. It's human beings, speed, faster. You've got, if you're going to utilize and critique them from doing it, it's no different than coaching. We make corrections and adjustments from the field, but if you ever hear a microphone on the sideline, you come in and you'll ask, say, what are they doing? Because you look at the pictures, you look at things. You can't see things live the way you can when you have the video, when you have the tape. We've got technology. If we're going to use the technology for the amusement of the fans, we have to use it to get the game sped up in a real-time fashion and to get it right. And to not do that is basically taking a tough job that's impossible, really, and saying, how the bleep could they make? Well, that poor schmuck has no chance to get it right when it's flashing in front of them. You really can't. It's really not possible in most cases.
Well, I think that's what fans want more than anything, Chris, is they want just get it right. Nobody's looking for gift calls. Nobody's looking for anything, you completely get it wrong because it's going to be good for my side. I think that deep down, people just want people to get it right. And all of this irrefutable evidence and all of those different types of things, what's necessarily irrefutable evidence? Somebody could see something
That's right.
Somebody else doesn't see. So, I mean, I think that it's just there's a bunch of built-in excuses that people are tired of. And for those of you that don't know what we're talking about this weekend, just real quick, Chris, before I kick it back to you, is in, for example, the Mississippi State-Memphis game, there was a second half punt.
Inexcusable.
That was ruled as down. You had an official come in, throw the beanbag and also do the above the head waving up to the press box to signal to whoever's keeping time up in the press box, stop the clock. The ball is dead. Play is dead. That's it. And then it was scooped up and returned by a Memphis player. They kept the touchdown and ruled later that not only was that wrong on that, it was also somebody was not keeping track of personnel. You had 2 number 4s on the field. And then you mentioned the intentional grounding. That's what happened in the Penn State game that caused them to punt on what should have been 3rd down. But James Carter, the referee in the game, saying, no, that's 4th down. You lost a down, which, of course, like you said, you get intentional grounding on 1st down. You don't, it's not like golf where it's in and 1 out and 2, you're hitting 3. You've got 2nd down in 16. It's just that it's not like normal penalties in that scenario where you get penalized the yardage, but it's still 1st down. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No. And those are not things that I'm referring to that you need all that much help with replay, I mean, that's just application of the job and missing it. And look, there needs to be, if you've got somebody, man, somebody's got to be there to, again, communicate, even in this case. All right, guy's confused. He makes mistakes. Hey, Dan, it's my friend. It's you got the wrong down there. Yeah. It's 3rd down, not 2nd down. It's 4th down, not whatever and you just because you have the live communication ability, you can do that. Into where the guy on the field is going to run into, you're just communicating to him. And then you have to have the ability to tell the people in the stands and on TV audience what the heck's going on because they're confused. But that to me is ways you can clean things up. But those things are that happen. Both of them are really unacceptable. And it's, but I always say this too. I've made mistakes as a coach. I've made mistakes as a player, and to think that officials are not going to make mistakes. I mean, I've seen guys completely. We got a coach that got grilled, at Florida State for what happened a week ago, and I think that the other thing I would say that as we're going to do these things and we're going to make them better, we need to train officials better. We also need to understand and get evaluated. Not everybody that makes it can handle the moment. Maybe the star is too bright, the circumstance. Sometimes you just need to say, so and so, we're moving on. That you got to cut them. You got to let them go. But you've got to have people in line and people prepared and people groomed. I don't think we do all these things correctly. So my belief is that football, college, and the NFL should do a better job of grooming and teaching and putting money into it. I think going forward, paying them better. I think benefits. I think all those things are important. I think in better shape, better training year-round. I think it needs to be a profession, not a hobby, not a part-time job where you can make a little money off of, but do it correctly, hold you accountable. And quite frankly, if you make a lot of mistakes, maybe you don't lose your career, but instead of working the Penn State-Auburn game, I don't mean this disrespectful, but you might be doing an Ivy League game next week, or something that is Division II. I mean, I think there are ways to do that to make it better. And maybe that person, maybe he wasn't as focused. Maybe, there's a lot of things. They're human, but I think we can aid it. And I don't think we need to treat them with kid gloves. We need to hold them responsible. But we need to demand things of them, but we also need to help them on the front end to do a job. I mean, imagine if you told the coaches, okay, guys, here's the rule. No headsets, nobody in the press box. I mean, it would be, it's a different, no, I mean, you would miss so many things.
Right.
Well, you know what? Let's embrace technology. Let's, I don't think you got to be careful in a coaching standpoint to not have cheating or disadvantages. But from an officiating standpoint, look, don't make them and point them out to be idiots because they miss a bang bang call. Let's help them to get it right.
Absolutely. And I think if nothing else, too, to your point, that, even more accountability, because I think that's the problem a lot of times with, for example, with replay, who do you have up in the booth? You have an official. And it's one of those that if I completely contradict the call on the field, then that's going to make them look bad. And I'm going against people who are in my profession, and it's, kind of a let's all look out for each other. That should be completely out of it, Chris.
Yeah, well, then that's right.
It needs to be completely objective and even take that remote possibility of favoritism out of it.
Well, and that's where my system is. That very guy is in charge. The game is now moved into the booth. That's the final say there. And the guy on the field is a guy that's applying the rules and providing the on the field element to it, but the eye in the sky has the final say. So your guy up there is not in a position where he's overruling a guy. The guy on the field can say to the guy upstairs, look, we got it as a catch here. And, we've seen it 3 times and we can't really look. If you're looking at a replay 6 times and you can't figure out if he caught it or not, you know what? There's no really a right or wrong answer, because most people are going to be, well, then on the field, did you see it? Did you see it? Then you communicate it, but not like, let's stop the whole damn game for, every other play. Let's get it done in real time. And yeah, I think it needs to be moved up there. And it's applied differently now. And I think it needs to be done in the reverse order. And eventually it's going to get that way. I don't know if I'm going to be around to see it. Maybe after I'm dead and gone, but I hope they figure it out before that, because I think it's getting worse and worse and more problematic, and it's a big problem, and it's costing jobs. It's costing, it costs an awful lot.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, there's just way too much on the line to get these wrong and also have things held up by a technicality. It's just ridiculous. All right, let's move on to a couple of other news and notes. One of them, just the bad news continuing for Ed Orgeron and LSU on the injury front. This time it is defensive end Andre Anthony going to miss the rest of the season with a knee injury. Chris, seemingly the last couple of games, that pass rush has gotten going for LSU, but this is a huge, just a huge loss for that team to try to stomach, especially when they're on the revenge tour this week against Mississippi State.
Yeah, it is. And, it's tough things. You next man up, you got to fight through it, but it is tough. No question about it. Started to play really well, and they're defensively, the whole unit's played a little bit better, and this is going to be quite the challenge. We all know what happened last year against Mississippi State. They're going to see a lot of those things. And I just mentioned last hour, I didn't think Mississippi State played very well offensively against Memphis. I thought Memphis threw a lot at them, and I just thought Mississippi State left a lot of plays on the field. So they're not playing as well. But this is a game in which they had a lot of success. LSU didn't adjust at all last year. So base pass rush is going to be key, and obviously playing more zone, which they're going to do, and I think perform a little bit better defensively. But losing guys like this on the front, very, very, very difficult. It has been a tough stretch for LSU. And now, getting into conference play, everything's on the line now from here on out.
All right, final news and notes before we get into the games that were week 3. That is Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. You probably wondered to yourself, where's Anthony Richardson? Why hadn't he played in this game against Alabama? Hamstring issue still persisting with him, but Dan Mullen saying on Monday that they are continuing to work on it, continuing to see it progress. But he had a scan late last week, and once they looked at it, said, yep, not good enough to go, but better than what we thought. So Richardson probably back here in about a week or 2, Chris.
Yeah, and Dan has a plan with him, and that's an injury that can be aggravated. So getting him right's important, and the fact that we didn't see him last week speaks volumes, and obviously employing Emory Jones in the run game. I do know they feel that Emory Jones is the better fit at being able to know what to do and how to attack in the run game, but they like this kid, and I'm curious to see when he'll get back, and probably would like to have both hands on deck for by the time they play Georgia. I know that.
All right, for all of these news and notes from the SEC as well as throughout college football, also the NFL recruiting leading up to the NFL draft next year, you can head on over to LandryFootball.com. It is worth the subscription in gold. I'm telling you, everything that we just talked about right there, it's in depth. Film room breakdown, all of those different types of things. LandryFootball.com is where you can get all of that information. Chris, week 3 games that were, as we'll kind of do it like we did on the last show of last week, where we went through all of the games and then we went through the marquee games at a little bit more in depth. But let's start first with Texas A&M, number 7 A&M at home taking on New Mexico. The Aggies, easy work of the Lobos, 34-0. Zach Calzada, a little bit better in this one.
It was, I thought he was comfortable, and I thought with a game plan and a week of practice, he would play better. They moved the football well. Obviously, the coverage was not real tight. They had some big plays, but he made some nice throws. I thought he really did a good job of dropping the ball in and spreading the ball around. The biggest takeaway was the offensive line play. Play better this week. They did not play well at all. I mean, their pass protection, there was leakage there. They didn't get movement. This is a game in which you don't know why that was off, but it just wasn't what it needed to be there. So that was a very sloppy performance up front, and I'm curious to see how much better that they get. But, they hit 428 yards. The offensive line was they gave up 3 sacks. Actually, it was 5 sacks, I believe, in the game. It's just unacceptable. Some of it was assignment errors and all that. So getting that cleaned up, it wasn't like they were beat repeatedly, but I thought the running game struggled in the first half. Those are things that you just got to get a lot better at. The defense, though, is playing at a really high level. It's going to be fun to see which offenses can get going this week.
Tennessee at home for Tennessee Tech. The Vols rolling to this one easily, 56-0.
Yeah, just a dominant performance, clean performance, not much resistance at all here. The offense is clicking. What's going to be interesting to see is how much of that can transfer this week. I know we'll get to it on Thursday's show that drops on Friday, is what they can do against Florida. Can they, I know they're like 20-point underdogs, but if they can score a bunch of points, where's Florida head going to be here? It's an easy game for them. It was a tune-up game, and they got really clean play from the quarterback position, protecting the football, more accurate throws, but boy, big windows to throw in this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough test for the Vols, but I think it's also, though, too, Chris, I mean, it's got to be for a program like them who's gone through what they have over the last year, where you say as a player or even as a coaching staff, it's nice to get these wins like this. It's nice to show we can go out there and control a game regardless of the opponent, but still go out there and show that we can put up points and we can stop them and we can do all these different types of things.
Yeah, don't have a Georgia State situation like that to deal with. That it's just like, oh my God, what the bleep is going on here? That's what people were really, really concerned about. Yeah, that's take care of business. They have.
All right, LSU getting a 49-21 win over Central Michigan. As LSU the last few weeks, Chris, it seems like the issues have kind of persisted. Now, I will say this. I think the last couple of weeks, regardless of the opponent, kind of like what we just talked about with Tennessee, and I know you shouldn't be talking about moral victories, but the defense has been much better for LSU these last couple of weeks. At least the pass rush has been a real bright spot for them. Still not as consistent as they'd like to be running the football, at least, though, I think we can say an improvement in this game in terms of running the football.
Yeah, I think it was better. I think that, I still worry about being able to block a good front. That's not something that they've done yet. I thought the passing game clicked, no doubt. We talked about the defense. But I thought they played with some energy and emotion. I thought the biggest thing out of the game was the fact that we saw some receivers step up and did a really nice job. Multiple receivers, the run after catch was really important, and I thought Johnson spread the ball around really well. Smith and Trey Palmer Best still seems to be playing really, really well. I thought that the pass protection was better with Declas and Hines in. It's growing pains. We'll see where it goes. The running game is not where it needs to be, and I think that what you're going to want to be able to do in a game like this coming up this week, and not to look too far ahead, but that's kind of what we do, is just got to run the football better. You hit it, and I just don't know that they're – look, if you're going to hold up defensively, you got to be able to balance that with the running game, and I'm just not seeing the running game yet. That's the biggest thing that you can point to and say, this is the worst run game performance this deep into the season for an LSU team in quite some time.
Yeah, it's not what they're known for. I mean, if anything, they're known for those two things. Even when they had Joe Burrow and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and people saying, oh, they're throwing the football all over the place. When they needed to, they could move the pile and they could run the football that season, 2019. So that's something, too, that I remember Ed Ogeron even talking about that year, is he said, look, I'm all about opening up the offense. I want us to, but I also don't want to lose that physicality. And they've kind of lost that a little bit, and they seemingly need to get that back.
No doubt about it. They need to get it back this week, or this is a really important game.
I think if nothing else, and we'll talk about it more on Thursday, like you said, you go there and get a win. I think that probably some people in Baton Rouge start to say, okay, all right, the first week was not great. The second week was probably, even though it was a win, pretty disappointing. Last week was a little bit better. Would have liked to have not given up 21 points, but that's regardless. But if you get a win this week, I think it's kind of like what we saw last year when they won at Arkansas. And they got that win. It was kind of like, okay, maybe there's salvageability here to a certain point.
Yeah, I think there's panics in the air. And a best thing a win could do is just to avoid a loss. I know that sounds if they lose, it's just going to be I can't even come up with the words. It'll be a complete doom and gloom. So a avoidance of a loss will at least allow them to breathe and let's see where things are going forward. But this is a long stretch, and they're going to play better teams than Mississippi State coming forward. Let's see what they're going to do. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, there's no doubt. As 3-2 is definitely a lot better than 2-2. How about a surprise of the week, as Kentucky had to fight, scratch, and claw to get this one, but still able to get a win over the Chattanooga Mocs, 28-23 at home. And I know a lot of people are going to say, wow, that is incredibly disappointing for Kentucky, but don't discount what Chattanooga brings, because Chattanooga is a perennial FCS playoff participant and somebody that has played in games like this in the past. So it's not necessarily a huge disappointment in this, where, you get the win and you would like it to be a little bit more, but that's not a program over there that's playing a bunch of guys who are playing way above your level and not as talented as you.
Yeah, they didn't play. Kentucky didn't play with any of the physicality that we know them to have. Will Levis didn't play well. He turned the football over, and it really was big plays by Kentucky to kind of turn the game around. Listen, Chattanooga outplayed Kentucky at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they averaged 6.1 yards a rush. And then Kentucky didn't get anything going on the ground. That's not Kentucky football. I chalk that up to, for whatever reason, they just couldn't do anything. Couldn't rush the passer. They couldn't defend the run. They just did they didn't win the one-on-one matchups. They really played poorly. It's like they maybe started to feel themselves a little bit. And you know what? Down in the fourth quarter. And the lesson is, if you look at a game like this, it could have very easily lost it. And so that's the lesson to come out of this. Better come ready to play. So that's the biggest thing for the team that always does the little things and handles all. There's no loose ends. There were a whole lot of them. So the fact that they won and you move on, that just wasn't good. Now, what you do with it is going to be fun to watch, because you do that, you can lose to anybody too, Kentucky. So that was a really poor performance. As you mentioned, this is not an awful team that they played. almost embarrass the hell out of you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those for them that they can get on the bus and go back to Chattanooga and say, "Hey, that wasn't bad for us." Whereas Kentucky, it's one of those. I mean, Chris, I'll never forget Georgia almost losing to Nicholls State in Kirby Smart's first year. And I remembered, it was a win, but everybody walking off the field, I mean, it was silent in the stadium. Players walking off the field where it was, we basically feel like we just lost this game with how close it was. So,
I know.
It's definitely, for programs, you want to avoid those at all costs. Let's move on to Missouri and Southeast Missouri State, 59-28 for Missouri over SEMO, a SEMO program led by Bobby Petrino.
Yeah, and Bazelak played well when he played, but then they got Macon and Cook in. It was there's not a whole lot. I mean, they threw it. They threw it effectively, threw it often. Tyler Batty played one half. They had so many receivers. It would be a 3-hour show to name all of them that got into this. It was really, it was a scrimmage game, and it was the first time the offensive line did a pretty good job, and it's the first time the defensive line did anything all year. So, look, it's understandable, weak opponent. I'm curious to see where they build from here. But man, that was a complete mismatch. I mean, it was over by halftime. I mean, it was completely over by halftime.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, again, like when you're in those games, I mean, there's one side that's supposed to take over this game. There's another side that's not necessarily supposed to take over that game. And for Missouri, they were able to run away with it and take advantage of the win. 45-10. Number 20, Arkansas taking down Georgia Southern. A little bit of a slow start for the Hogs in this one. Maybe just a slight look ahead to next week against Texas A&M, but still able to rally in the second half and pull away for this one.
Yeah, I think that probably had a lot to do with it. You hate it as a coach, but it's one of those things you work through. The offense still went for a bunch of yards, over 600, and they really limited Georgia Southern to 233 yards. So overall, it was pretty good. They kind of settled in, and they were able to win 45-10. I'm really impressed with how this team plays. I'm excited to see the game against A&M. I think they've improved this team in all three areas. I'm just really impressed. I thought there was some false starts, and there's certainly some missed chance and opportunities, but they had they could have easily put 60. Not that big of a deal, but just in terms of playing completely clean, not necessarily, but all the backs running pretty well. Dominic Johnson makes a mark. I mean, it really, the offensive line's blocking well. Jefferson's got like 366 yards. I mean, he had a really nice touchdown pass to Warren Thompson. They just second half offensive line just kind of control the game. I just really impressed with what they're doing. This is going to be quite the matchup in the trenches between A&M and Arkansas. I mean, I tell you what, now it's going to be it's not going to be for the faint of heart. It's going to be fun.
By the way, go ahead if you were going to.
No.
I was going to say, by the way, before Woodshed King or Spartan Barton or anybody gets on me in the comments, Southeast Missouri State is not Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino is at
Southwest.
He's at Missouri State.
Missouri State.
I don't
Missouri State.
Yeah, I don't want to shortchange the head coach there at Southeast Missouri State, which is the fifth year of Tom. I hope I don't butcher this last name. Tom Matakewicz, I believe, is how you pronounce his last name. But
I don't know. Tom.
The Red Hawks of the Fighting Red Hawks of
Missouri State. Missouri State is where Bob is. Yeah.
Out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri is where Southeast Missouri State is.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless. We talked about this a little bit earlier on when you had the referee mishaps in this game, but we'll do it now a little bit more. Memphis getting a huge home win over Mississippi State, 31-29 in this one. There was that one, Chris. I know you talked about the offense for Mississippi State did not look good in this one. Just really just not a good day in Memphis for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, look, I mean, they had 40 minutes time of possession. They didn't do enough with it. I mean, they had some mental errors that really caused them. They had 9 penalties. Just you've got some issues there that, look, this is a team that's built a certain way. I think the defense has played pretty well. There's no doubt they got burned by a bad call. No doubt about that. And probably win the game if not. But, I thought the quarterback play was inconsistent. The offensive line play at times was inconsistent. But, they with that time of possession, they didn't do enough with it. And that's kind of the hallmark of what, Mike is not a time of possession guy. He's just maximize points. And I just don't think they played a very clean game there. And I look at them and I see them as very inconsistent. I think it's a solid group defensively. They held Memphis to 12 first downs, 246 yards, but and that's a pretty good offense that Memphis has. But they just had 1 sack. They couldn't finish enough. They had a couple of mistakes there, some illegal substitution issues that can happen. Here's the thing I would say, though. Be aware, and it's on the officials, but you got to have good situational awareness on special teams. Always assume that somebody could pick it up, and so that shouldn't have happened from an official standpoint. That punt, but it also shouldn't have happened from a player standpoint and a coaching standpoint. So, it just wasn't a real good look for Mississippi State there. I think that physically they had some real advantages in the game, but they just made a bunch of mental errors, and they didn't finish and close out the game like they should have and could have.
And we'll see how they bounce back, especially, too, so disappointing. I mean, after the week before, taking down a good North Carolina State team at home, but still, I mean, that's a huge good win for you. And then you back it up by going on the road and not playing very well and losing the game. I mean, regardless of, should have won without the, punt situation. Look, it's one of those things that I've said it for years, and I'm a true believer in it. Take the game out of the officials' hands. Like, you control if you win the game or not. And yeah, if it gets to that point and there's a bad call, then okay, that's the bad breaks. That happens. But you should be one taking advantage of this game and being able to win it on your own, and they weren't able to do that. So,
and that's the history with Mike Leach. And that's what you're going to get with Mike Leach.
Yeah.
You're going to get the inconsistency because he understands what he does. He is inflexible in how he does it. He will win a game and maybe get the better of somebody strategically one game, and then he'll, a game that there's no business losing. And we talked about it, didn't we? We talked about this is a game that Mississippi State has matchup advantages against Memphis, and they should win, but no one should be surprised if they lose it. Mm-hmm. Because that is Mike, and that's his lack of consistency. And it's happened everywhere he's been. And in other places, people will focus on, if you lose at Texas Tech or at Washington State, they don't really care because they expect you to lose. But if you pull a big win, wow, that Mike is doing a great job. But at Mississippi State, at any place in the SEC, when you lay an egg, you're going to get called out a lot more.
Yep.
And, State's not one of the elites in the SEC. I get that. But that inconsistency is going to drive people nuts because when you beat the pants off of an LSU and then you get outplayed for 2-3 weeks and then you and NC State's not world beater, but that's a good win, as you mentioned. And you let one get away against Memphis. You're better than Memphis, but you got out-coached, got out-prepared. You made more mistakes. You didn't play a clean game. But that, in a nutshell, is Mike, and that's where it's always been. And I'm afraid that's what you're going to get there. And I'll say this, and I'll get off of it. The thing that's going to kill him more than anything is they've got a lot better program going on in Oxford, and nothing's going to get you run out of there and get people frustrated more than that.
No, you're not wrong, because that's where we're going next is 61-21 Ole Miss with a huge home win over Tulane. I think a lot of people, Chris, probably coming into this one thought, well, Tulane could give them a tough time because they gave Oklahoma a tough time. Oklahoma, aside from that win over Western Carolina, has had some less than stellar performances this year. Maybe are we overrating Oklahoma? That's a discussion for another show. But Matt Corral just continuing to look great as now, Chris, after this 330-yard, 3-touchdown performance, I believe updated Heisman odds released earlier in the week. And Corral now has a lot of people looking at him as, can he be somebody holding up the trophy at the end of the year?
It'll depend, obviously, that you can be the clear favorite in one game will knock you out. It'll really come down to how well, the numbers, and they win. They pull an upset over Alabama, which, listen, I don't know, it'll be an upset in terms of favorite and the betting line. The thing that jumped out at me, again, the offense is really, really good. And one of the questions I had is, who's better right now, Georgia's defense or Ole Miss's offense? It's an interesting question. I don't really have the answer to it. It's too early, but both are pretty doggone good. It's why I kind of phrased it. But, they did a pretty good job defensively in that they gave up some big plays. It's a big play defense, just like their big play offense. They come up with some they force multiple 3-and-outs on, I think it was 2 of the first 3 Tulane possessions. But they really came up with some big plays. So I'm curious to see, and it was one of those lightning delay, just, really messes. It was the rain, it was the weather delay after the other weather delay between Clemson and Georgia Tech. But I'm curious to see. They've got the heading to a bye week. They got a trip to Tuscaloosa on the horizon. As you mentioned, Corral's playing well. They've got receivers that are running all over the place, giving people trouble. Drummond and Mingo. They've got some real good talent. They can run the football very well. They've got multitude of guys that can make plays there. This offense is for real. I mentioned it before. I think the Ole Miss, Florida type offenses give an Alabama defense more difficulty than, an A&M or a Georgia type offense. But this is going to be fun to watch. How much better is this Ole Miss defense? Tackling better, yes, but can they defend the run? That's going to be the key, and because that to me is the early snapshot of Ole Miss, Alabama. Alabama's going to have to win this on offense by staying more committed to the run game and keeping the ball away from Ole Miss's offense, because Ole Miss is going to score against anybody. They're that good. But how much do they need to score? And can they bleed the clock a little bit so that their defense can have a chance to get off the field? Those are the things that I'm looking forward to watching Ole Miss develop as we go forward.
All right, let's go to the marquee games from the weekend. Let's start first in Athens, 40-13, number 2, Georgia with a win in that one. I think the storyline for this one, Chris, is the handling of the quarterback position, where we see JT Daniels back. He was healthy enough to play. I know that at least a discussion in the state was how Daniels started, and then I believe it was the third drive of the game, let's put Stetson Bennett in the game. And I know that a lot of people were asking about that, of why make that decision. And I don't know if it's necessarily parsing words, but I think that there was at least a little sensed frustration in doing that when you got a quarterback who is rolling like Daniels was.
Yeah, and I think we've seen enough of JT Daniels to know that he's good, but I also think he needs to see more work. And I think he gives them their best chance going forward at making explosive plays. Not that they can't win with Stetson Bennett, but I thought he managed the game very, very well. I'm curious to see how they are able to do against a really good defense, but I thought he mixed it around really well. I thought he was accurate. I thought he got the ball out on time. I thought he was late with the one ball. It was the pick. This was a dominant game as I thought it would be. That is the story. I think at times this offense has shown an ability to maybe be better than just good, but maybe really good. I see that there's a lot of weapons that as they get some of these guys back, I think they're building something pretty good. I'm curious to see how it comes together. Outside of the Florida game, I don't know how good this offense needs to be and still be effective, meaning I think they can score a lot of points in most of the people that they're playing, and maybe even against Florida. How much are they going to need to score there? Very curious. I'm also very curious to see this defense going up against Florida in a few weeks too. The level of talent, the depth is really good. But the thing that impresses me is how well they play, not just the talent that is playing, but how well they leverage the run, how well they fit the run with their backers. Their gap sound, I mean, they just are very, very good. I thought they misplayed a couple of balls in the past game, but, man, they're for the most part, they've been pretty good. This is make a case. I was saying in the last hour on Scout's Eye on college football that I see a lot of good. I don't see great in terms of the best teams in football, but I'd probably put Georgia number one right now, just in terms of just complete and what they're doing right now. And let's just go from there. But I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing from them, and I'm curious to see how they take it going forward.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a lot of arguments in terms of how they have played, really, especially up front too, offensive and defensive lines, because I think that was a little bit of an issue with a game that we're going to talk about here in just a second in terms of some of the best in the country in how they played up front, because I think that there was a little bit of concern coming out of that game if you are a fan of such team. It was not this game, so of course, process of elimination. I think you know what I'm talking about. But number 10, Penn State at home against number 22, Auburn, 28-20. Auburn with a chance late, but unable to come through with a fourth down conversion, and they lose the game 28-20 to Penn State. I think a lot of people really impressed with not only how Penn State looked in this game, but how they were able to really pretty much have this game from the beginning, Chris.
Yeah, look, I think Penn State's a really good team. I was impressed with what Auburn did. I thought their defense struggled. Derek Mason's defense had 4 mishaps in coverage, and I thought it really cost them. Penn State was able to make some big plays against Wisconsin, and they made just enough big plays here that I thought was the difference in the game. But I thought overall the defense played pretty well up front, and they really at the line of scrimmage played well, Dan. But they just gave up too many explosive plays. I thought the running game is really good. It's well schemed. They're physical. I think they're much better coached on that side. I'm curious. I know what Derek Mason's trying to do. He runs a lot of different things than, say, a Kevin Steele. I think this defense has a chance to get better and better. It's just the defending the explosive plays that are a direct result of communication errors that kind of hurt them a little bit. It just gave up too many big plays in the passing game. Thought Bo Nix was okay. I thought Bo Nix did a pretty good job. He didn't do enough to win the game for him, but he didn't make the mistakes that cost the team the game. So I think this kind of way I looked at it, I do think Sean Clifford made more plays. Thought that was a factor. So I came away pretty impressed with what Auburn was able to do. I thought they would be good enough to make this game a game in the fourth quarter where it would be in doubt. It was. And I thought maybe Penn State would just have a little bit more. They did. And there we go. I do think that the officials kind of overshadowed the game, and maybe it might have had an effect on that game being a little bit closer.
All right, one final one, as I just mentioned, Alabama getting out of Gainesville with a 31-29 win. I think a lot of Tide fans pretty uneasy with the way that this went. But, the funny thing I think we have to talk about first, Chris, with this game is the play of Emory Jones, because I'll give him credit. He had a lot of people saying maybe he's not the guy. And you were thinking to yourself, probably going to see Anthony Richardson in this game. Obviously, he knew that wasn't the case, and maybe that helped him too. Maybe the fact that he knew this is my show in this game. Look, go out there, show him what you can do. There's no there's no fear of getting yanked and having somebody else coming into this game. So I think that helped a little bit. But also, too, I just think that the overall flow of this offense was something with Emory Jones that we hadn't seen the first couple of games.
There's no question that employing the quarterback in the run game is what Dan wanted to do with this team, and Emory Jones has the best feel for the read option that they were running. Now, they do think Anthony Richardson can make big plays, and I think making plays in the passing game as well as the run game is something that they're going to utilize with them. I thought they did a really good job utilizing angles and formations that really got Alabama misaligned. But to me, what I really saw, and this is what I talk about in playing complementary football. So Alabama's up 21-3, and they're controlling the game. And this game is going about like I thought. All right, they're going to take control of it, and 3 and outs. So for Alabama after that. So Alabama, if they're in 3 possessions, are just able to get a few first downs and let's say come away with 6 points total in those 3 possessions. This game is probably not going to see Florida come back and make it close. Why? Because being able to sustain drives and get first downs keep your defense off the field. You go 3 and out, your defense back on the field. And then Florida puts a good drive together. And they keep your defense on the field. And now you're getting its cumulative effect. I thought Alabama's defense was worn down late in this game. They played better defensively in that early stretch. But I thought by formation, by their pre-snap movement, getting good angles up onto the second level, that Florida did a phenomenal job. We talked about make Alabama defend a 7th gap, an extra gap. They did it very, very well. They outrushed Bama 245-91, controlled the game. They had 5 drives of 75 yards or more. Emory Jones was outstanding. He played with confidence. And look, here's the thing about it is everybody's kind of giving – really, this is the 3rd game this kid has as a starter? 3rd, I mean, it's not like this guy's like, he's not the answer. He can't do this. He's never done anything. He hadn't done any of these 3 games as a starter. So, I mean, I think that this is a lot about Florida. But so what's my take from Alabama? Look, this Alabama team does not have the explosive qualities in the passing game against really good defenses that they've had in the past. They've got to be a little bit more rhythmic. They've got to be a little bit more pace-oriented, and they're going to have to sustain drives a little bit more. I thought Bill O'Brien got away from the running game a little too early, and I don't think they ran it quite as effectively as they needed to. Now, the other thing I saw in breaking down the tape was that, again, the defensive fronts, in this case Florida, the pre-snap movements, the stemming of their front, caused Alabama's young offensive line some issues there. To where they weren't able to sustain, and they couldn't get a few first downs. Look, they were really close to taking this game and putting it away. And they had a drop touchdown pass with was it Mechie that dropped it? I believe he was. It wasn't a clean game for Alabama, and I thought Florida played a really good game. Florida really was struggling to tackle Alabama early, but Alabama, I thought Florida really was very creative in what they did on both sides of the ball. So I think Alabama's going to have to stay a little more committed to the running game because in order for them to be really good defensively, they're going to have to be a little bit fresher. So I don't know it's the end of the world. I mean, it really feels like Florida won the game and Alabama lost it. The Alabama fans feel like it's a loss. And I'm going to tell you, the Florida fans feel like it's a win. I mean, and I said it last hour, there's only the Florida fans, no, we don't. They are all seemingly happy because they feel like now that game, in their eyes, many of them thought and maybe even feared that they were going to get blown out in that game. The fact that it was close, coming off of a close performance last year, gives that Florida fan and I think that coaching staff some juice that they can compete with anybody. Now the key is, and we just talked about, I talked about it last hour. What's Florida going to do? Is there going to be a letdown against Tennessee? I mean, they're big favorites. They should win that game going away. But are they? Are they going to play sloppy? Are they going to have like the shoe game against LSU where they just were completely discombobulated? That's the key. Now what are you going to get out of Florida? You proved what you can do. Now you need to do it more consistently.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this as well is you talked about the play breakdown for Alabama, 35 passes, 28 runs. You knew what Florida wanted to do in this game, and they were within striking distance to be able to do it, and they did it consistently enough, 43 runs to 28 Emory Jones passes. I mean, the number's not eye-popping from Jones, but still good enough to give you a chance in this game. 18 of 28, 195. He had an interception, but again, the stats not telling all the story. And I think the other part of it as well, Chris, to your point, that now this is a thing for Florida that, they've been hearing all year, well, Georgia's the favorite in the East. Georgia's the favorite in the East. Now this gives Florida fans confidence going into that game of saying, hey, we can control the line of scrimmage. We might have a shot in that game. So I think that that's still there. I mean, you had Dan Mullen even before the season. Hey, what do you think about Georgia being the favorite? He was like, well, wasn't that the case last year too? So I think that all of that's there. And that is the other part of it as well is Mullen was asked about that in his Monday press conference. He said, we didn't win the game. Like there's no moral victories. We didn't win the game. So that's something else.
I think they're a little coy there. I think they feel pretty good about themselves. No, they're not. You never want to come out and say, but we're pretty. They actually did a really good. I think they're more confident because I think, they could have won that game. I think there was a belief that they could win it. I mean, internally, but I think they feel pretty good about where they can go and the confidence level. I think that it'll be interesting to see. And, I laugh, they want to see them again. Well, of course you do. That means you win the East and, you're playing for the SEC championship game. So on the way you can play them again. I don't believe that Florida's the type of program that you get moral victories. What I'm saying is you went up against a team that was a 14-point favorite, and you really outplayed them, and you certainly outrushed them, and you did a really good job against them. And that's not good enough for you. I get it. But the alternative probably, could have been the other way where, as I said, this game could have been maybe a 13, 17-point loss in which you don't feel as good about yourself. So.
Couple of mailbag questions here. Like I said, you can get us on the comments here on twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. You can tweet at us at Dan Matthews ATL, at Landry Football as well. And let's start first with our good buddy. I call him out and he jumps on in. Well, I didn't really call him out. I gave him credit for saying if I don't get this wrong or if I don't get this right, I'm sure he's going to remind me of it. So I appreciate Woodshed King always keeping us on our toes. Mm-hmm. And that is Woodshed King's question here. To my amateur eye, Kiffin seems committed to playing more complimentary football. Chris, as you talked about giving his defense a chance. Do you see that?
Well, it's a running offense more than people know. That's what they do. They run tempo. Here's the thing about it, though. The faster you run tempo, that's not really complementing your defense. What I think they're doing a little bit better defensively is they're defending the interior better and they're tackling better. But the tempo is still pretty high. Now, I will say this. In a couple of games, and again, they haven't played this was a pretty good opponent that they played this week. But in previous games, they've slowed down the tempo, and that's important. See, I think that's what you have to do a little bit is you're going to have to score. Now, I think the tempo is going to be, Indy 500 lightning fast against an Alabama. I think they feel they got to outscore them, and they got to really, really, out-tempo them. But I'm curious to see what but in that case, they can't really stop anybody. So I do think that there's some element that I see, but until I see them being able to run, slower tempo run game, I don't know that I could fully say that they're playing the complementary defense.
Rock Westfall, is there anything Mizzou can realistically do to improve its defense, even to be marginally serviceable this season?
Yeah, they're not overly talented, but they are not doing a real good job setting the edge in the run game. People are running outside on them, and they're really slow with the run fits. I think those things fundamentally can get you better. At this stage, that's all you can do. You either get better players or you get your players better. And this is the time of year where you have to get the players that you have better. But I think they're limited on the defensive side. So the long range answer is get better players. But this year, I don't think they're really doing a good job in those two fundamental areas, fitting the run and setting the edge outside in the run game. Those two things have not been real productive.
Everyone out there, if you have not done so already, do me and yourself a favor and download the Southern Sports Today app. You can get this show, SEC Football and Beyond. You can get the Chuck Oliver Show. You can get the Punt and Pass podcast with Drew Butler and Aaron Murray. You can get the Alabama Football Scouting Report, the Texas A&M Football Scouting Report, Scouts Eye on College Football, Scouts Eye on Pro Football, the Landry Football Podcast. All of that and everything right there on the Southern Sports Today app, or also as well, you can get us wherever you get your podcast needs. That's Apple, Spotify, or wherever that might be. Chris, it was a great show to get us out of week 3. When we come back later on in the week, we will get into week 4 as we've got even more great games. They just continue to get better and better as the weeks go on, as the season progresses. For Dan Matthews, he's Chris Landry. Thank you all out there for listening. Thank you all in the chat for jumping in.
Yes,
on
thanks,
the
guys.
Mailbag. As let's make that a regular thing. We always love that, being able to talk even more football after we break down the games. So until next time, take care, everyone.